Hi, everyone. Welcome to SoDA Series Live. We're so happy this works. There were a few little technical issues on the back end, but I think we're here. Yay. I'm Kristen Bell from the Strategic Development Team at Adobe, and I'm joined by Tom Beck, Executive Creative Director at SoDA. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Kristen. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, so I have the privilege of working with SoDA, which is the Society of Digital Agencies here at Adobe. And one of the collaborations that we do is bring you this SoDA Series Live, where we share some of the leaders from the community, design leaders, creative leaders, join one of our amazing, talented design principals for a conversation on just what's top of mind for them to share with you as our creative community, some of the trends and highlights and passion areas and inspiration from them directly. So we're super excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. Please take a moment to say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from and yeah, what you'd like to take away from today. So Tom, do you want to just give, for those who may not be familiar with SoDA, do you want to just give them a quick highlight on what SoDA is and a little bit about what makes your community so special and amazing?
Yes, of course. Well, thank you all for joining us. Again, I'm Tom Beck. I'm Executive Director at SoDA, and I have the privilege of working with a bunch of incredibly talented and entrepreneurial design technology leaders across the world. SoDA is a community for founders and leadership teams at digital design studios. And we exist as a peer collaboration group to help each other get smarter about running the business, be connected to the resources we need to stay ahead of the trends and to navigate the market, kind of all in the service of creating very successful, innovative design studios with thriving company cultures. We're about 100 member companies operating across 28 countries. And like I said, it's just an honor to work with this group day in and day out, and with our friends and colleagues and partners at Adobe.
Yeah, and we're so thankful for you and the community taking time to share not only with each other, but also now with the broader Adobe community as well. So thank you. And I'm super, super excited. We haven't actually formally shared this yet, so this is the first coming out. But some of you had requested that we turn this into a podcast, and we're super excited to share that that's happened. Yay! Yeah. So you can now find SoDA Series Live on your favorite streaming platform and or podcast platform. And I'll share a link when I get off screen to some of those, to some of those locations. So we're super excited to share that with you. We'll be releasing new editions every 2 weeks. So you will find this one that we're about to have today on there in 2 weeks. And then, but you'll also now be able to see there's, I think, 3 archive sessions now live. So yeah, super excited to share that with you. Now let's get started, should we? We'd love to bring on Talon Wadsworth. Hey, Talon.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Talon.
Talon's our amazing
Great to see you.
Partner. Good to see you. Thank you. Talon's our amazing partner in helping actually make these conversations so rich and unique. So we're super appreciative of your time in joining us in this, Talon, and leading these conversations. So
it's my pleasure. Nothing more I like than talking shop with other creatives.
Yeah,
it shows.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. Okay, so Tom, would you like to do the honors?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and we're as Kristen mentioned, we feature members within the SoDA community in these discussions, and thrilled to welcome David Funkhouser today from Funkhaus in Los Angeles, an incredible digital agency and design studio. Founded in 2011. They got their start in the entertainment industry, but have branched out into all kinds of industry segments and work. And David is one of the founding partners and the design principal at Funkhaus. And we're thrilled to welcome you today. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining, David. Okay, so Tom and I are going to step off camera and let Talon and David.
Oh, well, she stepped off camera.
Yes.
properly. That's more like a ledge or something like that. So I will finish
the virtual hook, as it were, just coming.
Yeah, the Grammys and the Oscars should start using that technique. But I will finish Kristen's thought. Kristen and I will be interacting with you all in the LinkedIn comments thread. So if you have questions or observations along the way, please post them there. For questions, Kristen and I will try to surface those to Talon and David in the course of their conversation. So we look forward to interacting with you there. And Talon and David, have a great discussion today.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Kristen. Amazing. These little technical sort of difficulties, little bumps in the road today. But David, it's such a pleasure to sort of have you with us today. Again, we had a kind of a pre-conversation and prep for this, and I just took away so much from that. I almost wanted to make sure we saved some for today. So hopefully we can dig into some really interesting things and just sort of follow some of our passions kind of as they go. But first off, let's just start with kind of an introduction, not only just of yourself, but also tell us a little bit about your creative journey, like how you came to be where you are and what some of those moments along the way were to sort of lead you to leading and founding your own agency. And of course, being the design principal and running the show like you do today.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, it all started back in the mid '90s in Savannah College of Art and Design, where I, was studying graphic design and working my way through college. Really kind of a blue collar approach to design. Faking it till you make it, and then graduated and went to the next logical step in the Southeast was to go to Atlanta. So there. Ended up getting a job working for Turner Broadcasting, and that encompassed everything from TNT Sports to WCW Wrestling. So designing logos for the Fall Brawl, Bash at the Beach, all their events and their interactive press kits and posters and all that. It was a lot of fun. Basically thrown into the deep end straight out of college. Art directing pro wrestlers and photo shoots, and like rawr,
Love it.
So that was wild.
I think a lot of people who didn't experience cable in its heyday, I don't think they know like how culturally significant like Turner was in the cable landscape like at that time. Like if you were anywhere in the Southeast, like that was the place to be. There was so much sort of happening in that scene then.
Yeah, I mean, Cartoon Network was just coming about. I mean, there's all of that. So it was an exciting time to be a designer. Teams of, back then it was teams of 10, 13 designers in a room coming up with ideas, which was really collaborative, and it was just a lot of camaraderie back then. And there was a lot of money being put into, the internet and Flash, Macromedia Flash, which then became Adobe. So I, was learning, doing a lot of print and a lot of learning, Flash at that time. And then the .com boom and bust happened. And when that happened, the company lost like $4 million in one day. So we're like, whoa. So like rats from a ship, everybody scattered either to New York or Los Angeles. And my project manager at the time was like, hey, I got a job for you in LA. So within like 4 days, sold everything I had, broke up with my girlfriend, packed the Jetta and drove cross country and ended up in LA. I'd never been to LA. And which was wild. There wasn't really I know it sounds crazy to say, but there wasn't really a big art scene, design scene. Google, there was no tech industry here. There was I was shocked, honestly.
Yeah.
And so I worked for a company for about 6 months, and then September 11th happened. So then that tanked everything. Ended up working for Paramount, Disney, Sony, and just doing these things called interactive press kits, which is a CD-ROM, and all the posters and the dailies and everything, would be packed onto this thing and just send it out for a show. That's, evolved, over the course of a couple of years, got out of that and ended up working for a design firm, small design firm out of Marina Del Rey that was primarily doing a lot of just Flash websites for the commercial visual effects production world, which, the videos, literally transcoding videos on little tapes into 320 by 240 postage stamp videos and, making Flash websites based out of that. and learning, through Flash was, nothing was really documented. It was Wild West.
Wow.
So you try
Yeah.
something, it never would work, and you over it, iteration. But through that, ended up working for that company for 8 to 10 years, and really got in. That was when I think my career really got into hyperdrives, working with a lot of creative people, the level of, like Ridley Scott, and a couple interactions with Spike Jones, and, dealing with them. And it was new. This whole media was new to them too. So, collaboration was key at that point to, one, educating them on the technology, and also, they're looking to me and I'm like, you directed Aliens. What, it's just like crazy to be in that situation as a young designer. But yeah, so ended up, that company evolved into doing software as a service, and for this company called WireDrive. So we ended up doing a lot of UX UI design and building this company from scratch, and it took off. And then the owners of the company were like, hey, this design stuff doesn't really make us any money, so do you want it? I'm like, sure. So I picked up the scraps and started Funkhaus with that. So we had a Rolodex existing with an existing client base, and ended up with one of the lead programmer over there was like, hey, I don't want to do this WireDrive stuff either. Let's start our own thing. So we had the design component, we had the programming component, but we didn't have a sales component or a producer or project management. So we had this mutual friend introduce us to this guy, Nick Dyes, and then he was the missing link. So then, typical story, we're all working out of our garage, our houses, and then you get that one big client who's like, hey, I'm going to come by the studio and kick the tires. We're like, shit, we need to get a space now. So, yeah, and it's, started in the entertainment industry primarily, and still doing a lot of that work, but we've merged out into all kinds of other industries. So it's grown.
Well, there's something in
13 years
there.
later.
Of course, I mean, that's an amazing journey, and there's something in there I want to sort of tease out here for a second. You did say the magic word Flash that I want to get back to. We'll come back to that. Definitely a lot of touch points, I think, for a lot of designers out there who got their start in the 2000s with Flash. But I'm gonna put a pin in that. There was something in there I wanted to tease out a little bit. You as a creative leader, and as a founder, of an agency, I think in telling that story, it can feel, very organic. Like one thing leads to the next. But I wonder if you could tease out a little bit opportunity, right? Again, part of starting a company on your own is saying that there's a service I can offer, and we can get paid, and we can keep those doors open. So what was it like in that evolution in that time? Like, there's something you can tease out from, like, how did you know when there was an opportunity there, say, to continue going down this route, or offering this new service, or investigating this new technology so that you can widen your services? Like, is there something that, like, you could tease out in that for everyone? Because I think that's a really understated piece of being, successful over time, is being able to evolve and adapt, to the needs of your clients and to the needs of the market and technology.
I think a lot of it's instinct and luck, and just knowing.
Sure.
I think, especially, the jumping off point to start Funkhaus was, going out to events, industry events and all that, and talking to people, and just being steeped in that world. You start hearing, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was a thing that we could share videos like online and do that? And then that became WireDrive. And then, hey, wouldn't it be great if, we could do this? And so it's instinct and listening to people, and then, bouncing that off trusted peers. Like, hey, all right, so we're hearing all this stuff. What could we do? Mixed with a passion. I mean, I'm a designer. I love design. I still am on the tools. I love design. It's a never-ending thing that will just always be part of like, you learned about companies, all these different. Like, I was at dinner last night with a piercing manufacturing company, and I'm learning all about that world. And then we just did a project with Nike, and so it's like this knowledge thing. So it's like taking all that data and parsing it into a funnel, and then being laser focused as you can about all right, what can we do that's different in the industry? That's from an offering standpoint, from just a point of view, really. If that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And I would just to poke at it just a little bit more, I think the instinct thing I think is really interesting. But I wonder if you could say that instinct really comes out of a sort of curiosity, you know, a drive towards, you know, expressing ideas in kind of new environments. Would you say like there's something like that that resonates with you where you said like, well, you know, I mean, I often found, I think in my career, if there was this new opportunity, and like you said, with some of those early days of the web, it felt like the Wild West, especially in the Flash days. And it felt like there was this need to almost like go and explore the opportunity, right? Or explore the potential, right? And could you think of like those, like maybe touch on Flash just for a minute, like that, like what was it about like the web and what Flash enabled for you, you know, on the web that really kind of hooked you at that time? Was there something that you could think back to?
Motion, because the web was static. It was, you know, full, just flat ass things that were like, okay, well, that's a PDF that's just on a screen. So the fact that getting into the immersiveness of it in the beginning, I think was a huge part of it. And then, you know, tackling that and then getting into systems as well. You know, it's like, how do you organize yourself? I use analogy with my design team a lot. So, you know, there's this chaotic thing of creativity. And then there's also this systematic thing of creativity. And what Flash in the early days is you had to do a lot of prep work. And you still like when you get into a motion graphics project, you have to do a lot of prep work and lay that so that when you get to the creative part, you're not impeded by one step forward, two steps back kind of thing. And I think that the systems of organization, of file prep, of, you know, all that, it's, you know, it's like a carpenter, you know, in a tool and a wood shop. Make sure your tools are sharp, make everything's organized, make sure everything's in its right place, make sure you have the right kind of wood you want to use to build your chair, whatever. Have all that. And once that happens, then the freedom to get into that creative flow state, you've got all your tools and you can be rapid fire, well, from an efficiency standpoint, but also from a happy accident standpoint, things happen.
Yeah, I that totally resonates with me. That sort of feeling like setting up of the system allows me freedom, right? I'm working within the limited set of things that I've laid out in front of me. And then within there I can play. And then within there's also this element that I know that I've been obsessed with. And I remember hearing this from a sign painter that I took a class from. And I remember he really shocked everyone when he said that he was really obsessed with speed, with the ability to, because the more signs he could paint, of course, the faster and the more money he could get paid, but also with each iterative step, you know, he was problem solving, you know, so the faster he could work through those problems, that made him just the more faster, like the next time, right? Once he'd sort of established something, it sort of now set the sort of bar, you know, and then he could sort of springboard to that and then springboard off of that into the next, whatever the next thing was, you know. And I've always been obsessed with that idea of like, how do I set myself up for that speed of iteration, right? That freedom to explore within the confines of that system.
Huge. Yeah, no, I think that actually puts the cherry on the top of what I'm saying, of that, the iterations. So your creativity, like you have one thing, you've got your goalpost set up, and then you got one thing, oh, this is what I want to do. But then on that journey, some happy accident happens. Oh, maybe that would work. Maybe that work. That work. And that craft, I think, is what it boils down to, is being a crafts person.
That's a great statement. Also, book recommendation for everybody out there, The Craftsman. Check it out. Fascinating. A little deep, but it's really trying to put in context, I think, the role of the craftsman within society and kind of the forces that impact the work that we do as craftspeople. Great one. But yeah, I'll get some links out there for everyone on that one.
Check it out.
So just coming back to Funkhaus a little bit, you've grown in the time since you started to 2011, right? Was it?
Yep.
But you've managed to kind of keep it relatively tight. So I wonder if you could talk about kind of the team and the team makeup there and kind of the value you see in kind of keeping this tight sort of talented team, rather than I think there could be on the flip side like a move towards, right, like you're sort of constantly, you could be growing, right, growing clients, growing headcount, right? So talk a little bit about the team makeup and how you think about sort of constructing it and kind of keeping it lean and tight, and all that talented people that you have there.
Yeah, I think when the thing happened in Atlanta, where we lost $4 million in one day, we had an army of designers and programmers and all this. I just saw a lot of waste, a lot of bloat, and I kind of vowed, I kept pretty much to this. I'm never working for a big agency ever again. Never worked for a wide, a BDO, any of those things. I'm going to keep it mean and lean. So when we started Funkhaus, we were very selective with who we were hiring, and we wanted, honestly, like everybody wore multiple hats, of course, at any small company, but we wanted these people to be like straight up assassins, like special ops, and be able to pivot on a dime and all that. So we've kept that mantra throughout. So our producers are also can edit Photoshop files, or going in. Everybody can do everything, and I think that a couple of reasons why, financial reasons. We don't. The more mouths you feed, the less creative projects you can take on, and then we bloated up above, kind of like a little bit above 20, and we found, okay, well, now we have to take on this job we don't want to do for whatever, some macaroni banner ad bullshit or something that nobody cares about, and just to feed mouths. So we, I think it really allows us to be craftspeople, and allows us to be, we're all intertwined from a educating ourselves standpoint, and everybody on the, especially the creative team, I'd say the content writing team and tech team has their specialties. So there's somebody who's authority on certain things like motion or, typography, whatever. And if somebody, me included, gets hung up, like, hey, how do you do this? There's an expert on the team at all times. And that redundancy is essential for a small team. People get sick, people get in motorcycle accidents and go away for 3 months or whatever. We got it. It's going to suck, but we have it covered. And I think that the creativity, getting back to the creative part of it is within that discipline set, we also have, people that bring, designers or creatives who love color, hate working with color. This is bringing in a mixture and well-rounded. So not everybody's, wearing black t-shirts and all black and loves Bauhaus and, loves, moderate typeface. And that's, this is the design firm. And if you come to us, this is what you get. We analyze the DNA of the creative problem. And I think that's something that'll actually a lot of studios fall into, is like they get known for doing one kind of thing, or they're a one-trick pony or whatever. And the one thing that I think we have to have for Funkhaus, we analyze the DNA of the actual creative problem, and we could do a crazy, colorful, gradient-filled project, and then do an antiseptic, super classic stealth, just black and white type design. And it's,
I mean, definitely. I love the value of those diverse viewpoints, right? And the sort of that sort of impact through osmosis, right? That sort of happens, and when all these different people with these different sort of specialities or different sort of points of view come together. And like, what are some of the positive impacts that you've seen? You mentioned just that kind of like relying on others' expertise, but kind of more broadly culturally, like what do you see sort of internally with the sort of personal growth, like, of the team, and so the benefits you see as it comes out in the work?
I think we have this systems in place where we spent a lot of time making sure that our design in the digital space, that whatever we're building in Adobe XD or Figma marries with the design, the tech components. So that, going back to the whole carpenter tools thing, we don't have to worry about the core of our code base or anything. So we know, we've got slideshows and all this stuff built in Figma, built in the code. So again, we can turn the dials or blow it up completely, and we don't have to focus on that minutia.
Yeah.
So that helps us be more creative in that respect. And I think that one thing that we started very fairly recently too is, individual interests of our design team. So we have this thing, it's like Flex Fridays. So as long as it's related to your craft, your design trade, you get a Friday to explore it, whether it's
Cool.
AI and that, or hand-drawn posters. It's all over the map. And I think that
Yeah.
that helps.
I mean, I think that seems like one of the sort of things as a leader, that like you're making space like for that personal growth, right? And so
Correct.
keeping a tight, lean team, like everyone can sort of maybe slot into their roles or into their specialities, but that seems like one of the things you're doing to continue and encourage that growth, right, within, individually, but also creatively, as a team.
Exactly. And also to combat fatigue as well.
Yeah.
And also, keeping the energy levels up on the creative front. Because if you just keep on, you become a machine after a while. And the fact that, you can have time to really focus on creative, which actually is pretty hard sometimes. Just to, hey, I got a thing I got to do. What am I going to do? Or just think, hey, I get this Friday. What am I going to do? What am I interested in? Just the fact that a designer is going to ask themselves that, or a creator is going to ask themselves that, then keeps the momentum going forward.
Yeah. There's been this trend, I think, more broadly in the UX industry, like towards, efficiencies, right? Just like, hey, here's the kit of parts from the design kits, right? Like you should be like, this should enable you, you should be working faster. But there's something that you're sort of saying, I think, in offering up the space and the opportunities to just like do something creatively, whatever that might be, make something by hand, dive into a new technology, that like, going through those motions like is its own benefit, right? Whether you're, just drawing something very simple, or maybe you're even, designing, a new presentation template, or, whatever, things that don't seem like they have a, they're not related directly to client work, that they have their own like sort of additive effects, on the output of the team overall.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get back. You said the magic word. I wanted to get back to it because I want to get back to Flash, because I think there's a really, one of the things that I've loved in my time at Adobe, is this thinking about the ways in which tools impact creativity, and they then impact the things that are then created, and eventually, hopefully, impact some of those platforms and mediums and technologies in the future. So I talk about like how, like, I think we touched on it a little bit, but what was it about Flash, and how did it impact the work that you were doing and the work that you wanted to do in the future? Let's dig into that just a little bit more.
Because there was not a prescript, it would break a lot.
Yeah.
So, hey, you can do this full screen video. You do exactly what it said it would do. No. And you had to be nimble, and you had to pivot on a dime, technically and creatively. And I think that trains your brain to not just think, like, oh, this, everything's kind of done and it works. There was this hazardness about it that made you had to be resourceful. You had to be a critical thinker about everything. And then, so that, and the system thing as well, making sure, because you've had a base layer of at least these variables aren't going to change, and we know that they're good. All the variables in the creation process that are going to come up will be easier to solve. But I think that the tools, the principles still apply today, from 20 years ago. Motion, not overdoing it. There's a lot of clutter. There's a lot of clutter, I think, in Flash too. There was, people building video games in it, and then there was people doing, like Learjet websites in it, and all over the map, and it was really experiential, and it took you could 3D zoom into a world and all that, so it changed the paradigm there. And then I think, mid 2000s, when Steve Jobs, drove the dagger through Flash, design team, Flash is dead. And I invested 12 years of my life learning ActionScript. I'm like, shit, what do we do now? And everything went flat. And there was something that happened, I think we talked about a little bit too. It's like, typography and everything just kind of got flat,
just flat,
one dimensional, and went almost tactile. And now
utilitarian, right? Very utilitarian. Yeah. That's one of the, I think whenever I end up talking with people, I think about tools like Flash, and it's not just Flash. I think there were many others that were enablers of new forms of communication. It really was that something that cracked open something that was very regimented, very basic, and it pushed those platforms and pushed the modes of communication and through interactivity, through motion that you mentioned. You kind of push the web and digital communication forward, right? And things that the ways in which designers, other creatives were using a tool to push forward, communication and technology, I think is one of the most fascinating sort of long tails. I think that's why I always kind of bring like Flash becomes this touch point, right? But you're right, like there was a real flattening that took place kind of post Flash. And I think you and I, as we were sort of discussing in our first conversation, like it's been actually really fascinating to sort of like see things just slightly opening up a little bit, back on the web and some of these other more regimented, sort of standardized platforms. And are you tracking any of that, or the things that you're seeing that are interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I liken it to almost the William Morris arts and crafts movement, where the Industrial Revolution automated the loom and all this stuff, and then there's just like people freaking out. Yay! Look at all this stuff we can do, and it's automated, and we don't have to work like all the time. And then so I think that kind of happens. I think that's going to be a constant wave of the pendulum swinging back and forth. But I think now, the AI thing is ever present in every industry, in every conversation I have with, no matter if it's a farmer literally in Guatemala who's using it to automate his watering cycle, to, based on hooking it up to weather stuff, the data that they're getting, or every design or creative that I talk to. And I think the flattening I think we're going to see a resurgence, a couple of things of AI's making our lives a lot easier from a design standpoint. Generative fill, all this stuff that we've spent hours noodling around with, now that's gone. We can just boom, done. So then trying to figure out how that applies to creativity, it's I think we're back at the Wild West of it, honestly.
Yeah. Feels like it. Yeah, I this is a question, and I'm glad you went exactly where I wanted us to go with this conversation, which is the ways in which technology can provide these efficiencies, and sometimes just disruptively, right? They can offer very disruptive sort of evolutions, right? So now that we can generate all this stuff like with a few words, or with the click of a button. Now that we have this question though, like what does it mean, right? And have you been seeing anything, or have you been trying anything yourself with some of these new technologies? Like, and I always like to think about when I remember did drawing digitally for the first time, drawing with on an iPad, with a stylus or even with a finger, and thinking to myself, well, this isn't drawing like I know it from pen and paper. That would almost be kind of limiting it. But what can it do and then these efficiencies that are offered by this tool, and how can I push this, to kind of beyond what I'm capable of on my own, with just pencil and paper. Have you been seeing anything like that, or exploring or experimenting yourself with some of these AI technologies, and where you've wanted to push it? Like, have you been thinking about that?
Yeah, we have been on several levels. On the design level, being able to, we have a client that does podcasts, and they come to us as a retainer client, come to us every week. Hey, here's a podcast of a company and a person and what they do, what the company does, what the person's background is. Typing in those prompts can surprisingly give you an amazing idea you never thought of, and it's hyper realized, and boom, done, instantaneous. And then you tweak it and you futz with it and all that. But so that has definitely been something that is interesting to me, the expedition of that creative process. And then from a systems process, how do we work in a prototyping software, and then we've got our code base, and how can we automate what the design software is spitting out, which is pretty robust in data, and then taking that data and running it through some sort of script that can then prep it for our front end developers to where they're not doing the mundane cleanup of everything. And I mean, as a business owner, time is money, and that efficiency could increase profitability through the roof, right? So we've been doing a lot of experimentation with that. The silver bullet's not there, I don't think, but it's close for sure.
Well, there's something in there that I think really resonates with me, because I've been sort of spinning up this project, to really showcase, what could be possible, with these generative technologies. And there was something that you were saying there, that creating that pipeline, or sort of imagining that pipeline where you're sort of taking the result and you're doing some kind of transformation then on top of it, right? Because I think a lot of us, and if you're following the sort of scene with from Mid-Journey to Stable Diffusion to Firefly, if you're just putting in a prompt and getting an image, that's fine, but it seems a little bit like a one-trick pony, right? And so there's something in there that you're saying where you're running something on top of it, right? You're sort of taking that and then you're processing it in some way. You're transforming it. You're evolving it, into this destination, which is really defined, by your, in this case, maybe your artistic vision in a way. Like, what are you trying to express, in what are you trying to communicate here? And there seems to me like that's something I've been tracking. I don't know if that sort of resonates with you, or maybe sparks something else that maybe that you've seen in your team experimenting with these generative technologies.
Yeah, it's a human. It goes human, synthetic, human, synthetic, human, synthetic, and it just keeps bouncing on throughout the process. And I've seen my design team wanting to be like, oh, let's make it all synthetic. We've got this great design system, and we built this great design system, and it works great. But in that, but then there's little things, like there are design tenets that, hey, that spacing's off, the composition's skewed, there's a padding's messed up, and I think that's something that I find my design team is overlooking some of these things at times. Like, yeah, it's done. No, you have to have that extra human wash at the end to ensure your creative vision.
I mean, there's something in there, and I really like this tension I think that you're seeing and that we're all navigating together, because if we're not sort of taking that sort of, again, that kind of one-trick pony result, okay, yes, I've been able to put in this prompt and yes, generate something that, yes, is in the ballpark of what I told it to do. But if it's that fast and cheap in its way, then like what does digital content even start to mean anymore? And I don't know if you've thought about that kind of on the flip side as well, where if you're just sort of, if it's just synthetic, all the way through, like what does visual content start to mean, to you at a certain point, as a creative, as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's on and off switch, black and white, type in prompt, get result, great,
Yeah.
cool. If that can satiate most needs, right? But I
Yeah.
think what creativity is the gray in between,
Mm.
because
Mhm.
you have to have the gray in there, because otherwise it's still, I think, going back to whatever ASCII binary computers. I mean, it's got evolved, of course, a lot, but like start finish, this on off. Yes, this is creative and it can execute really well. But then there's like, I was talking to my brother in law last night, who works for a VFX company, and they're using AI to generate storyboards for
Mhm.
commercials, video games, all this stuff. And that's where they're seeing like, hey, it spits out exactly, there's a bunch of people that aren't even creative people at a lot of these companies and brands and things, that are like typing in prompts and, oh, we can do this creative project and we don't even need the creative department, blah, 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 and then spit out a thing. And it's kind of almost what they want, but then they have to hire an artist to come in and go over and draw over the storyboard or whatever to be
Yeah.
exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't know. There's the gray, and I don't know. There needs to be that human interaction at some point.
Yeah.
No matter how automated it gets.
I heard this thing a while ago that stuck with me, and it was really talking about kind of automation, just more broadly, not necessarily in the sort of creative sense, but I just wanted to throw it out there and maybe get your sort of take on it, which is, you know, I remember, especially as designers, we're sort of hyper aware of trends, right? And sort of stylistic or aesthetic sort of trends. And I was thinking about this thing that I heard about automation a while ago, and it wasn't necessarily specific to visual design in any way. It was saying that, like, we're really good at telling each other stories about what's important, right? And at a certain point, if a thing becomes kind of oversaturated, along comes someone who says, well, actually, we should really maybe like this other thing. And they sort of, convince a few people and convince a few people of that. Now all of a sudden, the trend has gone from this is important now to, this other thing is now important. And I wonder if, just to get your sort of response to that, to think about like the impact of these technologies and where you think that might lead us from a sort of visual, sort of storytelling standpoint. Like what news stories are we going to turn our attention to now that, Midjourney can take, or any of these generative technologies can sort of like copy, style and aesthetic from the past? Like, what does that mean for our future? I don't know if you've thought about that from a
I
visual
have.
standpoint.
I mean, where I draw a lot of inspiration from, history, repeats itself, all this stuff. But you can, even on a personal note, like I have a bucket of where I take screen grabs. I've been doing this since 2009, and it's
Hmm.
indexed like a server, and I go back through it and just, re-educate my, it's like, oh, there was this thing that happened that I forgot about
Yeah.
that could then come back. So I've been looking a lot to my historical archives, our internal company's historical archives, to draw, see some points of uniqueness that were being done or have been done, and like, hey, that was a good concept, bringing it back. Um, but I think, there's restraint, honestly, going forward. Is, I think, the great power comes responsibility thing. And I think, when you get a lot of tools and it becomes easy, there's this visual clutter that starts happening. So being aware of knowing when the design needs to lie down, knowing, clutter, going back to core tenets of good, just composition, just, what's, aesthetically pleasing. Just because you can do it doesn't mean it looks good thing.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, I think we're at that Wild West part again still, where we're still trying to figure out, like, what the hell is next? We can do anything. So what do you do now?
Yeah. 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 I really like, I think, where your head is at on that, and looking to the past, like for those historical precedents, and you mentioned this earlier as well, where there have been these sort of technological revolutions where things have become more streamlined, more efficient, more automated, and there has always been a response, and there's been some lag time, right? But it actually made me think. I was looking at manifestos recently. Sort of, I'm big into manifestos and having your own sort of like personal creative manifesto. As you know, it's a very formative moment in my career when one of my mentors sort of like prompted us to do that. And I was looking at the Dadaists, and a lot of the sort of like this whole movement of artists sort of coming out of post-industrial revolution, really searching for meaning, in a more highly automated world. And I think that's a historical precedent that has been sort of lodged in my brain. We're sort of
that's a really good point.
Sort of confronting this.
Yeah, this is not a pipe moment.
Very. Yeah. Really fascinating. This is a fascinating discussion. We did have a couple of questions come in. I'm going to throw them out as we're sort of getting here to the end. I always like to make sure everyone in the community is able to sort of ask some questions of the great guests here. So Sari, she asked a question here. Can you explain the creative process behind your work? Do you apply specific techniques such as design thinking? And I think a lot of people who join us are saying, well, how is it done? How do you do this? So maybe talk a little bit about your kind of own creative process or your own kind of creative practice and the things that you've done and sort of learned over time, to help you kind of along the way.
Yeah, it's our industry, the entertainment space, right? We're our own competition a lot of the time. So we get clients say, hey, you've done all these amazing websites for the entertainment industry. We want to use you, but we're just worried, is it going to be unique? And I think that the one thing I would say is, you really have to critically think about the client or the creative, the problem. Like, hey, this is a company that does this. Why are you different? Analyze the DNA, do a DNA scan on the company. What are their things? And then taking from that, building, the intel you get from that then informs the design. So, and it could be literally you're in a room and you read somebody, like what they're wearing, how their mannerisms are and all that, and very psychological, can inform design decisions that, and again, going back, using your instinct on that front. And then taking that and, going out, and part of our process is always research. No matter how many times we've done this particular project, I don't care. Go do research, go for a walk down the street, you'll find something, that will inspire you. And I think, that's one thing I think our design team too is really, as late, like there is so much shit out there right now.
Yeah.
Concept Seeker, all Site Inspire, HTTPs, Godly. It's just like, pop, 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 and here's a new cool thing, pop, pop, pop. And you want to go, oh, that's cool. It's like a barracuda is always looking for the shiny lure and goes towards it.
Yep.
And I see a lot of that happening. And I think that, we have to digest, the Godlies, the Site Inspires, the Behances and all that, and have our finger on the pulse of that, but then selectively cherry picking from that sea of creativity what inspires you for a particular project. And I think enlightenment through the flow state of repetition as well too is something that we really need to get back to, because I can't, how many times you're doing a layout or you're doing something over and over again and something happens there. So the happy accidents, embracing those is a lot of our creative process, honestly. When they do happen.
Yeah, you're right. And it is the sort of rigor of those activities, right? And there's something that connects into that book that I mentioned, The Craftsman, where I talk about how for the craftsman, we all kind of joke that like you can't turn the designer brain off, and we're all critiquing, kerning, and everything and all that, and all the cliches, right, that we sort of kick around with each other. But there was something that he wrote in the book that said, for the craftsman is always, the brain is sort of always working through those problems, and so, you might be reading a book, you might be walking on the street, you might be going to an art gallery, that the brain is always sort of active in that problem solving. And so as you kind of immerse yourself and rigorously, in those activities, research, inspiration, more sort of repetitive sort of tasks, sort of you're priming your brain and your muscle memory, so that when you do sit down, like you've done all the prep work for that, and you have your table of tools all laid out in front of you, and you've been turning this problem over. And when you sit down, now you're sort of prepared now for that, because your brain's been doing all that work. And I've always found that to be true. And that's why when I read it in the book, it really just like stuck with me, because it's like, well, I get so much out of just going and like reading a book, even though it might be completely off topic. Like I get so much from that, the sort of ordered state of that. And I feel more creatively energized when I come back to sort of jump into the project.
Yeah. I mean, I live in Guatemala primarily, right? So lived in Los Angeles, urban environment, designers, that whole ecosystem of like, you're surrounded by designers, you're surrounded by, MoMA, Mocha, all cool stuff, walk down the street, see cool branding everywhere. And then go to Guatemala where there's none of that. But what you see are a bunch of people painting signs by hand, like you were saying, and learning from that. How do they kern? How do they use their color? Some of the most unexpected color I've ever seen in my life. Not because they chose it, because we only have blue, we only have teal.
That's all we have.
They don't. Yeah. That's all we got. And we got black. And so they'll put blue and teal, and then they'll outline it in black, and it looks stunning. So that kind of unexpected, or like the patterns in the what the native Mayans wear out, and you'll be on a volcano, and he's like, wow, that textural pattern. So yeah, I agree. It's a constant. You're constantly input, and then the refinement of it. It's how you
Well, you mentioned a couple things there that might be related to the last question that I always enjoy asking our guests, which I think a lot of people, are really looking for ways to stay, creative. We sort of have all these pressures. We have all this sort of pull from our attention, sort of constantly. So you mentioned a couple things there, being in Guatemala, like being maybe away from some of that sort of constant sort of stimulation there. But what are some things that, like, if you're stuck, creatively, like what do you turn to, to kind of help you sort of stay afloat, sort of help those creative gears start to turn? Are there things that you sort of always go back to, or things that you really enjoy that you find have a big impact on the sort of the creative battery, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, I have it's really about taking time. There was a couple of years ago where I was like, Saturday mornings, that's I'm making sure I spend 2 to 3 hours. I'm going to scour the web, and I'm going to look all over the place. And I bookmark things throughout the week, like, oh, that'd be a good thing to check out on Saturday or whatever. And then just, it's almost like going to church, but the design church of like, hey, when you go to church, you got to be there for an hour, and you might not like it, but you got to be there. And it's kind of that mentality of like, this is my time to, it's almost like you get to that point of exhaustion. I find a lot of times, especially when I'm doing branding projects, because you look at logos, everything's been done to death. So you're like, all right, how do you exhaust this? And that's where, when I get stuck, a lot of times it's on branding projects where you're like, okay. And that's when you start looking, one, get outside. That's 100% go do that. But then I think also just taking the time to dedicate to research. And if you're, like a parrot, look at history, it repeats itself. You will find something in history that has been done, whether it's back to the Egyptians, or it's something in, the Industrial Revolution, or cave paintings, whatever. There's always an endless trove of inspiration and historical archives.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that you started with there, I think, is something that I've definitely been trying to internalize as well, which is like, make that time. Like you take your time. That we constantly sort of feel these demands and these pressures, and if there's something that just eats away at creativity, it is that, right? And so when you're able to spend that time, carve out that time, it's just fascinating to me how, like, and I've been doing this a little more deliberately recently, where like all the threads just start to come together. It feels like magic. It feels like, sort of the inspirational bolt in a way where taking that time really can help you sort of pull all these maybe disparate things together to find that path forward,
Subconsciously, you're doing the work in your head, maybe, and then because that's
exactly.
when that time happens. It's like you're lost and you're grasping at things, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, it just clicks, and then it's like boom, the idea is there. Then you foster it into execution.
Yeah, then you rely on your practice and your processes and follow it to the end.
100%.
Well, David, I mean, I could continue talking with you like this for much longer, but unfortunately, we are going to wrap it up there today. I want to sort of thank you for the wonderful conversation and all the great insights. Here is Tom and Kristen back with us. And thank you for joining us, David. That was a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been a good time.
Yeah, thank you both. That was so good. David, we'll have you back for a V2.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you, David. I particularly loved that line of enlightenment through the flow state of repetition. I think that's really critical. And I think that probably anyone, Talon, I don't know if that's picked up at all in the craftsman, but that seems to be a principle of anyone who practices a specific craft is only when you're really, really adept at it is where the innovation can start to come into, because there's a sort of automatic aspect of certain parts of your practice, and that creates the space for brilliance.
Yeah, it takes a lot of, I think, a lot of I just lost the word, but it takes courage, I think, to rely on your processes, at the end of the day, to sort of get to that, to know that, like, I'm going to do this and it's going to get me to where I need to go. But just starting is the hardest part often, just getting yourself into that. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to spend this time. That is so hard for all of us, so.
Having faith in the process is key.
Yeah, thank you guys. And thank you everyone so much for joining us today. It was very active and live chat. That was super fun. So thank you. And as a reminder, we have launched our new podcast. So you'll find this conversation there in 2 weeks, but feel free to visit today on your favorite podcast platform. There's a few episodes already posted from our archives. And we hope that you can join us next month. We'll be back on July 25th. Yep, July 25th for discussion with the founder of Blue Cadet, Josh Goldblum. So hopefully we'll see you then. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. Awesome seeing you.
You too.